What up, Marsh strolling ambiance edition. First and foremost, an apology for the technical issues on Monday's pod. We're still trying to figure out a way to do visual pods, though. We'll keep trying, but do apologize. But we'll figure it out. Still got a pod going up today, obviously. We're recording this Wednesday morning, first thing, and we'll keep that rolling. So, however that gets figured out, we will keep this, Monday, Wednesday, Friday cadence. So, no reason to be concerned there. But yes, let's jump in. To recap, some of the topics that were covered on the now non-existent lost file of the Monday podcast. Really one of the big ones resurfaced last night in a really great Best Coast Ballers versus Bad Boys basketball game. Best Coast comes out with a win thanks to a massive Lasterius Outlaw performance. He hits the game-winning three, then the game-sealing three in the 88-82 win. But the biggest concern, and I highlighted this in that Monday pod, after the game that they lost to the Originators, the biggest issue that faces West Coast Ballers right now is their depth. And in a win that even showed up last night, and I think it's why, the panic meter, I'm not saying it's on. I'm not saying they can't win it. But to me, I'm just skeptical of Best Coast Ballers being a legitimate championship team and call it akin to pulling for a Houston Rockets led James Harden team or the Philadelphia 76ers. There just seems to be something about them that at the wrong moment things just go wrong. And I'm not saying something will go wrong for Best Coast, but that lack of depth, to me, really is their ultimate, what goes wrong. Because against the Originators, Outlaw had a pretty good game, right? He didn't play great. I think he shot 35% in that one. That's not good. Had 27, but they just had no real option to slow down DJ Wagner. And Wagner got going in that game. The pivotal moment of it, 77-73, kind of points out the perfect example of what we're talking about. The Outlaws are down by 4. They've seen their 10-point lead disappear. Now they're trying to find a way to get back in this thing. They're down by 4 I think they had made their last bucket or two to kind of keep this thing alive. Outlaw pulls up, misses a 3 off of an isolation. There's no movement, which is the same 3 that he hit last night to seal the game. Same type of 3. Defender backs down. Outlaw pulls up, misses the 3 against the Originators. Well, on the very next possession, DJ Wagner comes down, gets the ball off a off-ball screen, pinned down for a wide-open mid-range. He hits it. That's the proof of Best Coast Ballers just relies on Lasterius Outlaw. And look, this isn't a knock on Outlaw. I think that there's some good talent in Best Coast Ballers, but it's not talent that can actually create for themselves, right? It's talent that is very reliant on very specific situations. So, for example, Evangelos Mullins and Lenné Newman are great rebounders. They are, and we talked about it with Rick briefly, they are phenomenal leapers. They are great athletes. What they are not are self-creators. And so when they are in this situation where they now have to figure out how to score, they can't do it. And so you can get big double-figure games. Keep in mind that no other player on Best Coast Ballers has somebody that scores in double figures or averages in double figures besides Outlaw. Mullins and Newman can score in double figures. but they do it off of pick and roll. They do it off of offensive rebounds. They do it off of mismatches. They don't do it in the flow of the game, designed plays for them like Outlaw does. Against Bad Boys basketball, we saw a lot of that. Bad Boys has a couple of options. Bo Pagnotti, Samuel Bogus, even Lorenzo Phenom. I know Rick isn't a big fan of it. I'm not sitting here to tell you he's a top 5 player in my opinion. I don't think he is. I think his game isn't really equipped for a back you down in the post type of performance. But at least he's going to work time and time again with designed plays, post ups. These post moves are clunky. If you can figure out a way to make them work, I think there's something there as a 4 next to a good defensive 5. But that type of player doesn't even exist for Best Coast ballers. So it's a huge win for them last night. It's a win that you can look at and say, okay, this is why this team can win a championship. They just beat a team that's in the playoff race. Sure, they can win the first round, but what happens when they play the originators? What happens when they play Southeast or Rocky Mountain, who we'll get to in a second? What happens when they play Showtime or H-Town, even Bay Area, any of those top 10 teams? We've seen them struggle, and it's why they were losing 2 of their last 3 coming into last night's game. Since, I think it's May 20th, they just have been a 500 or below team. So they lost 2 of 3, they lost 3 of 5. They just weren't playing like a great basketball team. Yesterday was good. It stops the bleeding of a continued losing streak, but they haven't been able to string together games to the point that makes you feel confident they can be a championship team. Rocky Mountain, they lose by 2 to Southeast Select. Phenomenal game. We got exactly what we would expect to from Trey Turner. Really great Terrell Pearson game. And this was, I talked about it briefly in the Lost Pod of Monday. But I don't know that there is a bona fide number 2 guy in Southeast. I think Trey Turner is awesome. But I do think that his number 2 options operate a heck of a lot better than the number 2 options for a team like, let's say, Best Coast. Now, I should also say this. I don't take from that game last night between Southeast and Rocky Mountain. I don't think you walk away from that and you say, this team is now definitively better than the other team. A 2-point win, I don't feel great about. In terms of just making that declaration, I think both of these teams are capable of winning a championship. Rocky Mountain has been one of the most consistent teams over the entire season. They just don't have a guy, and all respect to Justin Bell, they don't have a guy like Bronny, Lace Darius, Trey Turner, DJ Wagner, where you go, elite, top 5 player, rest of the roster is really good. They don't have that guy. And that's fine. It's just, that's the position that Rocky Mountain is in. So, for last night's game specifically, I thought a great game from Daquan McDougal. We'll start on the loser side. Great game from Daquan McDougal. He's a guy that you hope to have big games, but you don't necessarily rely on it because it is a little inconsistent in terms of how big of a night is he going to have. A tough night from Justin Bell, and because he's their number 1 guy, he's their barometer. If Justin Bell is having a good game, you really, really like Rocky Mountain's chances. If Justin Bell isn't having a good game, you really don't like it. And in this case, 5 of 13, 38% from the floor, made just 1 3, had 5 turnovers, and they lose 78-76 in overtime. That's kind of just where they're at. Again, they can be in positions to win games like this, but I think this is how good Rocky Mountain is that if you can get Justin Bell in action, get him going in rhythm, this team is really, really hard to beat. If he's slightly out of rhythm, they suddenly become very beatable, and it's not even like they lost to a bad team last night in Southeast Select. So let's get to Southeast Select. Trey Turner, 19 points, 3 of 6 from 3, continues to be just a absolutely unconscious shooter. Shot only 8 of 21, though, from the floor. And this goes into that, okay, if your star's having a bad day, who do you turn to win? And again, let's not act like a 2-point win changes the whole, you know, landscape of things. But Terrell Pierce and Gabe Pope have massive games. Both of those guys are players that can come in, in Pearson's case, off the bench. I believe Pope actually came off the bench too. Both of those guys can come in and they can create offense for themselves. I think having a number two being a playmaking type of guy is infinitely better than having a number two that is a center in the way the game is played today. 20 years ago, when your number one even was Shaquille O'Neal, then that's all there was. I mean, you didn't. If you had a big center, good center, you were winning games. Now it just doesn't operate like that. So having a number two like Gabe Pope, like Terrell Pearson, both of whom were just awesome last night. 18 from Pearson, 8 of 12 shooting, 2 of 3 from deep, 14 points, 4 assists from Gabe Pope. He's off the bench. He goes 6 of 10. Does have 4 turnovers, but sorry, some ambiance for you. He goes 6 of 10 from the floor, 4 assists, 1 steal. Those two guys, if they're in rhythm, I don't think make up a bona fide number two on their own, but I think they combine to be the type of number two that pairs well with Trey Turner. Turner isn't a guy that anyone would confuse as being some on-ball elite creator, but he is a guy that you can rely on to be efficient so long as you've got somebody competent enough to get in the ball. And I think both Pearson, although Pearson is much more of a creator himself, and Gabe Pope, I think both of those guys are more than capable of getting that done. So overall, a great win by Southeast Select. They needed it. They stay now a half game above Bay Area for the top spot in the conference. We don't bury Rocky Mountain after this. If anything, I think we feel even better about Rocky Mountain for being able to continue to go toe-to-toe and do so on a tough night from their best player. All right, talk to you Friday.